couple of years completely destroying her life and humiliating herself in court for literally zero upside. What she did to begin with was low-life behavior, but her refusal to admit that she's wrong and just continue to double down over and over and over again online and in court to the point where things just got dragged out for years just solidifies her as an absolute scumbag. So today we're talking about the TikTok psychic who accused an innocent professor of ending the lives of the University of Idaho students even after the person who did it pleaded guilty.
Now to a strange development in the unsolved murders of 4 University of Idaho students. A professor at the school is now suing a TikTok creator for defamation. She says that creator has accused her of being involved in the killings. The lawsuit says the creator has published dozens of videos tarnishing the professor's reputation.
Tonight, a TikTok creator facing a defamation lawsuit surrounding the unsolved murders in Moscow, Idaho.
Oh my God. Killer Rebecca is suing me.
Rebecca Schofield, a University of Idaho professor, is suing TikTok creator Ashley Gillard.
I'm not stopping, so let's just start there.
Alleging Gillard has wrongfully accused her of ordering the killings of 4 University of Idaho students last month.
So yeah, that is Ashley Gillard, and a couple of years ago she swore that she solved the Idaho student tragedy with her spiritual intuition and visions. And the way she did that was essentially making up an entire fanfic about how a random university professor that she found on the website did all this. And she apparently got this information because she did a tarot card reading on the professor's picture on the university website. Then she doubled down even after the cops, the courts, and common sense told her that she was extremely wrong. But now, with Brian Koberger officially pleading guilty to the crime and being sentenced to life in prison, her whole psychic empire has now collapsed. There's no maybe, there's no but what if. No, she is completely wrong. She was completely wrong. She's been wrong the whole time. And she's now turned an innocent professor's life upside down for nothing but a bit of TikTok clout. This whole saga obviously revolves around the tragedy that happened in November of 2022. This small college town of Moscow, Idaho was shaken up by horrendous crime. And that's putting it lightly, because 4 University of Idaho students had their lives taken away from them in their own home. And with any crime of that magnitude, the headlines went crazy. And with that, so did the true crime theorists. But this case had everything that social media loves to sink their teeth into: unanswered questions, a mysterious crime scene, and a community desperate for answers. So of course, an army of TikTok detectives, self-proclaimed investigators, and a bunch of wannabe psychics started churning out theories. And I don't know why this is a sudden thing, but as soon as a big criminal case goes viral, suddenly all these TikTok psychics come out of the woodwork claiming that they know exactly what happened. I mean, we saw the exact same thing happen with the Gabby Petito stuff. But
there
right
is
in the middle
a single area where Riot has been undeniably ahead. And in that area, they managed to stay ahead of everyone else for a long time. In fact, it is only now that the rest of the gaming industry started to catch up. And it took entire 6 years to do so. But finally, after all that time, TFT is getting...
So there has been an explanation for why Donald Trump went missing. So he comes back and he's complaining about a contracting job inside of the White House. I used at the White House the most beautiful marble stone available anywhere. Surfaces are very important to me as a builder. As everyone knows, I built many great buildings and other things over the years at the White House. I am very proud of the beautiful stonework we did in the Rose Garden, in this case using limestone plus. 3 days ago, while admiring the stonework, I happened to notice a huge gash in the limestone that extended more than 25 yards long. It was deep and nasty. I started yelling, "Who did this? I want to find out now." And I didn't say this in a nice manner. I wondered, was it vandalism or was it stupidity? Lo and behold, because of the fact that we've installed the finest security equipment anywhere, they brought back the stupid people with their boss watching in sunglasses. It was a subcontractor that was installing heavy landscaping on a steel cart that was broken and tilting badly, with it rubbing against the soft, beautiful stone. I love and respect great workers and contractors, but something like this should never happen. Now, I'll replace the stone, charge the contractor, and never let that contractor work at the White House again. But how great is the video equipment? We caught him cold. Make America great again. And you can see, by the way, there it is. And they fucked up the grass too. And wait, that's the guy with the sun. He did watch it happen. He watched the entire thing happen. And you can see that the guy's holding it up this way and he's in that direction because it is tilted that way. Who did this? I want to find out now. And I didn't say it in a nice manner. Yeah, you can see him. They really fucked this up, man. And to be honest, Trump is right. He's right about this. What is Trump trying to prove with this post? That's oh, God.
But how great is the video equipment? We caught them cold.
Do you believe in reincarnation? If you answered no, well then maybe I can present some evidence to the contrary that might make you a believer. What if I told you the soul of Ted Bundy has returned and found a new vessel? He's on TikTok.
Excuse me. My name's Lori.
All right.
I just think you're one of the most beautiful girls I've ever met.
Oh, thank you.
Could I buy one of those things for you?
Oh, no, it's okay. I'll be fine.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm fine.
I saw this video earlier today and it's a doozy here. So this girl is at a thrift shop and she started recording because there was some creepy guy following her around like a cartoon character that smelled an apple pie, so he's been like floating towards her, and now he's made his move.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you engaged with someone or involved with someone?
No, I'm not, but
I'm not either.
I'm only 17, so.
Okay, well, that's a good age to be.
Yeah, it is.
I'm not quite that.
All right.
You can hear how frightened the girl is here. She's extremely uncomfortable and just trying to be like dismissive so that way she can get out of this situation here. And the guy is unrelenting. She even mentions that she's 17, underage, and that doesn't faze him even slightly. He even says that's a good age to be. He's like, oh, interesting. Well, you know, good enough for Roblox, good enough for me. You know, on Roblox, you're allowed into some, you know, real spicy games over there. So, you know, it's a good age to be, I guess. I'm not quite that age, you know. Ha 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 ha.
I got injured about a month or so ago. My knee is kind of, I'll show you. It's kind of banged up. I get bitten by a tick, actually.
Now, this is where I drew comparisons to Ted Bundy. He's trying the fake injury riz here, which Ted Bundy was famous for. He used to, like, walk around on crutches sometimes or have a fake cast to lure in more victims, saying, like, I need help doing something. Clearly, I'm injured. Please, can you find it in your heart to lend me some aid here while no one else is willing to? The world is so cruel, and I need a special woman like you to come help me with these chores that I'm no longer able to do. And that's exactly where this mysterious stranger goes here, too. He starts by saying, like, are you engaged with someone? Very not normal thing to ask somebody, by the way. And then she mentions that she's underage. He's like, that's alright, what a great age to be. Hey, you want to check out my fucked up knees over here? Look at this shit. Look how gnarly this is. I got injured a little while ago. Look at these knees. Feast your eyes on an injury. Look at this.
Maybe you can guess which one is bad.
Oh, I have no idea.
You can't
No,
tell?
I can't tell.
It's the right one. Anyway, I live out in the country.
Unfortunately, she failed the minigame of guess which.
Maybe you can guess which one is bad.
Oh, I have no idea.
You can't
No,
tell?
I can't tell.
It's the right one. Anyway, I live out in the country.
Unfortunately, she failed the minigame of guess which is my bad knee. It's a very tough one. Like, that's an old carnival game. There are no real winners there. It's pretty much a lose-lose situation there. This is just so unhinged, so he pulls up his pants to better reveal his knees for this little side quest. Like, come on, take a guess. Which one of these disgusting knees do you think is the one that causes me most issue? Well, you can't tell? Come on, it's clearly the right knee. Look at it. There's pustules popping on it. It looks like a boss's weak spot in Dead Space. Are you even trying to win this game? You can't tell? Look, I hurt myself. My knees are injured. This is no laughing matter. I need your help. Then he hits that classic, like, non sequitur moving on line of, so anyway, he just drops the most, like, insanity imaginable. He's just like, yeah, so anyway, I live out in the middle of nowhere. People will not be able to hear you scream. It's going to be completely isolated from the rest of society. I'm out in the country.
And I got a bunch of stuff that I was kind of trying to keep up on for work, but it's kind of falling behind. I'm looking for someone to help me.
Oh, okay.
it's a paying thing, but it's basically involves getting my stuff out of the garden and processing some things like tomatoes and that kind of stuff.
Right, right. I'm getting a phone call.
I have a
line of so anyway, he just drops the most like insanity imaginable. He's just like, yeah, so anyway, I live out in the middle of nowhere. People will not be able to hear you scream. It's going to be completely isolated from the rest of society. I'm out in the country.
and I got a bunch of stuff that I was kind of trying to keep up on for work, but it's kind of falling behind. I'm looking for someone to help me.
Oh, okay.
It's a paying thing, but it's basically involves getting my stuff out of the garden and process. It's a paying thing, but it's basically involves getting my stuff out of the garden and processing some things like tomatoes and that kind of stuff.
Right, right. I'm getting a phone call. I actually have to go.
Okay.
There's a lot more to process here than tomatoes. I think this could have been like a full-blown kidnapping situation here, actually. This is disturbing. So, he's trying to pitch her now on, like, coming to work for him, like, to give him help with carrying things out of the garden and processing tomatoes on his land because he can't tend to it anymore after that tragic knee injury with that bastard tick that latched onto his beautiful knees. And he's trying to, like, lure her in with financial incentive, like it's a paying thing. He also tries to, like, butter her up by trying to, like, buy her something from the thrift shop. So it seems like, and some of the comments pointed this out as well, he is trying to prey on someone he believes needs money, so that way he can take advantage of that and, like, get them out into the middle of nowhere with him. It's like dropping money on the ground and, like, luring it in on the fishing rod, like that episode of SpongeBob with Mr. Krabs. I have to imagine it wouldn't actually be a job that you're signing up for if anyone took him up on this offer here. I bet they would never be seen or heard from again. This was like some, like, dangerous skin-crawling riz here from this guy. Yikes. Very yucky. Good call from her to, like, minimally engage with it and then get the fuck out of there the second she saw an opening and an opportunity to run. Anyway, that's a creepy old guy right there. Just wanted to share that. That's really about it. So yeah.
Reasonable competition. And you won't believe where it comes from. So TFT has kinda been a miracle. Pretty much from the point it hit PvE. It started crushing the queue servers with its popularity. And as the game ramped up, there were some ups and downs, but the success only grew. With the most important part being that this game became very successful without anyone knowing it. This could be for multiple reasons. By now everyone knows that TFT only exists because it copied Dota Auto Chess. Apparently a lot of writers were playing it, they saw that the game had some issues and they realized they could spin up a new team to make that game but better. Which is exactly what happened, and again, they did all of this with its success being hidden. That's because Riot doesn't really share their numbers on player base. You might have noticed that most games stopped doing that, because at the slightest hint of a dip in player base, the game is pronounced dead. Also, in today's gaming with all the microtransactions and gacha mechanics, The number of players is no longer the best indicator of a financial success. And let me tell you, even in that area, TFT managed to stomp everything. They kept the player numbers high through constant innovation, while at the same time they made the base game so good that most people don't even care about the gacha these days. That is extremely rare in today's industry. However, because it took TFT 6 years to get to this point, should someone else want to make their own auto-battler but better, all the possible odds would be absolutely stacked against the developer. In fact, this is something that Mordog himself mentioned 3 years ago now.
I think people really underestimate how successful TFT is, and a lot of other companies don't feel willing to gamble on something they perceive to be less successful than it actually is. And then now at this point, they also have 3 years of catching up to do. I think it could work, you'd need the right team for it.
And oh boy, have those words turned interesting today. Because out of nowhere, 3 days ago, a new auto-battler has risen. But this time, it is not a mix of an auto-battler and some other genres. For example, in the space of auto-battlers, Hearthstone Battlegrounds was big, which managed to save the entirety of Hearthstone on its own. But that couldn't entirely be compared to the gameplay of auto chess games. That one is still mostly an auto card game. However, this time, we are talking about a 1-to-1 TFT competitor. And it was brought up by a powerhouse in the gaming industry, Hoyoverse. I don't even know what joke to start with. If you don't like TFT's gacha mechanics, you're gonna be transferred into a whole new world. Of course, if you somehow live in a blissful life. Hoyoverse is the powerhouse behind Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, Zenless Zone Zero. And with all of these, they became known for knowing exactly what to do with gacha mechanics in their games. With some of these being the most profitable video games on the market. Now look, I've had my own gacha arc a few years ago. I've played all of these and I can tell you, yeah, all of these are pretty good games. Despite the memes and despite the weird war about what gacha game is the best. Yes, that entire thing is as dumb as it sounds. At the end of the day, I have to say, all of these games are pretty good and Hoyoverse knows what they are doing. Just beware that these games are designed to take your money a lot. Maybe don't go into a liquor store if you're expecting anything else other than liquor. But therein lies the twist. You see, all of Hoyoverse's games rely on one big aspect. The gacha is directly tied to the gameplay mechanics. In every one of their games, you spend your money to get characters which you use to play the game. Which is when you may start realizing that's not how TFT works. Can you imagine you having to buy specific units so you can actually play specific comps? So for example, if you don't buy your Malphites and Sivers, you can't play crew. That sounds like madness. Which means there is no way Hoyoverse can monetize the game like that, right? Right? Well, while we still don't have a lot of information on the monetization, we did get a trailer that gives us a pretty good idea. Mainly, we got 2 videos that dropped. First, there is the side-by-side teaser, which is a cinematic teaser that tells you what the world is about. And so this is Honkai Nexus Anima. It is a twist on the Pokemon universe that takes place in the Honkai Star Rail universe. Yeah, I'll be honest when I say, that's a pretty cool idea. This all should be taking place on a planet as the space adventures are going on. And if you look at the designs of the monsters, oh boy, is it fun to see someone actually challenge Pokemon, which might be hostage to some of the laziest developers we've seen. I mean, the last one who challenged them was Paul.
Making terrible decisions. Yesterday I talked about the lady who wouldn't stop texting and driving and then crashed the rented
but the
vehicle.
key point being here
Today I
that
want to
there
talk
should
about
be some
Jeffrey,
monster collecting
the boy
mechanics
wonder who won't
involved,
stop drinking
which is
and
where
driving.
we also got the second trailer, which shows us some
You can't go back in your car right now.
footage. And strap in, because the way the gameplay is presented here is hilarious. So at the beginning of the trailer, you need a spectacle.
When I saw this Midwest safety clip for the first like
by
2 seconds, I
traveling.
thought for a
Yes,
second
this
that it was
actually does have a
Jokic. I
semi-open
thought he went
world,
from
and you
buckets to
can use the
brewskis here.
monsters to
Turns
travel
out
around.
it is
Kinda
a
like
gentle
Pokemon also
sir
did in
named
some of the games,
Jeffrey.
and Pal World,
And the way
but
he is holding
don't
that
let
case
that
of beer,
distract you.
it's like a
Genshin Impact
precious
has
artifact
released
to him.
in
He's holding it like a
2020.
running
It has
back
now
holds a
been 5 years,
football.
and the
Jeffrey's
UI
already
has
been
not
in one
changed
accident
in the
here. His
slightest.
car is
And I
smoking,
mean,
and
just
now
have
he's
a
got a
look at
brand
the
new
art
case
style.
of beer
This
because
is
he's
as
ready to really
hoyoverse
get this
as it
farty
gets.
sharded.
It even
And he
has the classic
very much already
hoyoverse
seems
time skip
sloshed,
button,
and an officer's
which
like,
has
"Don't
to
get
this
into the
day
car,
never seen a
Jeffrey.
practical
You've been in an
use.
accident. You
Other than
can't do that." And he's like, "No, I'm
fast-forwarding, so
good.
you can make a
I'm getting
pretty
in the car.
screenshot, I
You
guess.
can't stop
Now
me.
here,
This is
you
my
can
beer
also
and this is
see
my
that
car.
as the character is
You do
running
the math."
around, it is actually different characters.
Get out of your
And
car.
your little
Get out of your car,
monster
sir.
changes too,
Get out of your
which
car.
means
You're
that
being
part
detained.
of the
I need you to
gacha,
get out of your car.
as is the tradition with
Get out of your
hoyoverse,
car.
should still be
Get out of your
linked
car.
with different
Guys,
characters.
you ran into a
But
different
also
car.
again,
The
you can
suspect
see
is
some
able to
kind of
turn the
monster
officer's
collecting
body
should be
camera off.
happening.
When the
Now,
officer
as
is
we
able
keep
to
watching,
reactivate the
mind
body
you, we
camera,
are
the
currently
suspect
at
has
1
violently
minute,
backed up
25
and then
seconds,
takes off,
and we can
prompting
still
the
see
officer
the
to
characters
initiate a pursuit.
running
I don't
around
know if
with
this was a
pets and,
calculated
playing
move
with
from
them.
Jeffrey
So
here.
next,
Maybe he's a
naturally, we
high-tech
get to
hacker
the
and just
character
went to the
creator.
mainframe here,
Now,
scrubbing the
this
body
is
camera
actually
footage,
cool
getting
because
rid of
this
the
is
evidence.
something
Or if he
Hoyoverse
was
has
just like
never
fighting
done.
back and
In
just started
all
like
of their games, the
poking at
main
the body
playable
camera and
character
happened
is
to
a
turn it
character
off.
that is
But
already
regardless,
established in the story.
the footage
But
is
what's even
gone
more
from the
curious
archives
is the
here,
level of
and he was able to
customization
punch it
here.
in
You see the
reverse
hats,
and then
you
just
see the
peel out.
clothing,
So then it was
you see the
time for
dreading
a
feeling that all of
moderate
this is
speed
probably
pursuit.
also gonna be
Just
gacha,
1 minute
which kinda
before this
teases,
interaction,
what
another
if
officer
this
in
is
the
gonna be
area is
first
interviewing the
Hoyoverse
victim.
game where the monetization is gonna be purely cosmetic. That would be interesting to see, and later you'll see that is likely not the case. I mean, again, there is no way the gacha is gonna be
Whose
around
vehicle
the
was hit by the same suspect just minutes earlier.
They're pursuing southbound on Abbey. There's 3 Sheffield. I'm just staying back, blocking traffic. Slow speeds, 30 miles an hour. Almost hit one of the units. Continue.
Most of this chase happens at approximately 30 miles per hour, so my little game theory here is that he activated cruise control and just started fucking pounding those voodoo rangers in the passenger seat. This man was probably butt chugging as much as he could, knowing full well this was probably the last time he'd have the chance to do that for a while.
Possibly .19, speeds are 32. Alright, we're coming up the Gulf.
A big sigh from the officer here. So you can see Jeffrey's not exactly staying in the lane. He is swerving all over the place, dreadfully. The man is hammered, and he is only continuing to get more and more inebriated, because you'll see here towards the end, he is actively drinking during the chase. Like, I don't even think he recognizes that he's being chased. I really think in his world, he's right now in like the fucking battle bus partying.
Gulf. Speeds 32. Coming up to Antoinette. He's all over the road, definitely .19, I'd say.
He comes dangerously close to head-on collisions with cars multiple times. I can only imagine what it was like to see this unfolding as you're just like driving home at night and there's this fucking lunatic just going like this with the steering wheel coming right at you. That must be terrifying. Also, I tell you what, those mailbox must have been sweating seeing this douchebag coming through. The amount of times he gets close to kissing those mailboxes is astounding. He is like right next to them, shaving them with his car so many times on this chase here.
Still northbound, passing Hemlock. Speeds are 29. We're passing Hemlock, speeds are 30. Alright, he's getting on, going the wrong way on 90 here. We're going the wrong way.
After a slow stroll around the area, taking us on a bit of a tour, he finally decides to just go the wrong way on the highway, and that's when the officers decide, we've got to do something about this. Now it's even more dangerous. So now they're readying the pit maneuver.
If you can, be very careful on this.
After some bumping and grinding, they do get him to drive into a ditch. I guess it's not really a pit maneuver. They're looking more just to like bump him off the road to get him away from the cars, it seems, and get like a, I don't know, maybe like box him in or something. Because they didn't really go for like the big time pit maneuver where they swing out wide and fucking blast the butt cheeks on the car or anything. It was more so like they were almost kind of like shielding the road from this car, like trying to just like grind him off to the side, which eventually does work.
Fire and EMS is in a ditch, and I'm gonna need sugar for my car.
Get on the ground now! Put your hands behind your back right now, you're gonna get tased again! Don't f***ing move, you understand? I can't stand up! Stand up. I can't! Why not? With your leg. Stand the f*** up. I cannot stand up!
Slim Shady goes on about how he can't stand up. here after they've tased him. So he crashes his car into the ditch, and then he immediately tries to run through the forest there. He does not get far. I don't think he knows where he is. So this man was probably just like running into like a tree like an NPC stuck on a wall. He actually only made it like maybe a foot or two, despite bailing out of his car pretty early.
Okay, so Katya, you're driving, you drove down the ditch? What the f*** you motherfuckers? Come on, brother. Nah, bro. Nah. Listen, you guys are nothing. Listen, we've dealt with each other before, man. I live in America. I live in America. Nah. Listen, you guys are nothing. Listen, we've dealt with each other before, man. I live in America. I live in America. So do we. Well, so do we, yeah, right? So do we. I live in America, You gotta stop drinking, Jeff. No, I live in America just as you do. You gotta stop drinking. Just as you do. What if I leave this damn forsaken country, bro? Okay. Best of luck to you. Wish you nothing but the best.
Now that was hard from Jeffrey right there. I live in America. What if I left this country, huh? I don't know what he was expecting the response to be like. No, wait, Jeff, don't make that threat. Don't leave. America needs you, Jeff. You're a hero. You're a real patriot. But no, Jeff, you can't leave. Don't say things you're gonna regret. We can't lose you, Jeff. Who's gonna drink all our Voodoo Rangers? I recognize Jeffrey's completely gone right now, but I find it fascinating how common this dialogue option is with drunk drivers. I have seen this exact statement from so many other drunk drivers in these body cams and shit, where they all go like, I live in America. I'm an American, goddammit. You're infringing on my rights. Wait, I thought this was a free country. Since when can I not drink beer while driving the wrong way on the highway? What? This country's gone to the birds. This is ridiculous.
Hey, sit back, man. Do you want to go to the hospital or do you want to go to jail? Hospital. That's where we're going, but if you act like this, you go to jail. You go to jail. Jeff, stop. Relax. We'll be there in approximately 10 minutes.
An officer finds open alcohol cans in the suspect's vehicle.
Got 2 open Voodoo Rangers.
This happens to be the exact same brand of beer the suspect was holding a case of at the beginning of this incident, indicating he was likely drinking multiple cans of beer during the vehicle pursuit.
In the ambulance, he kept like lunging forward as if he was trying to jump scare officers or something, like it was Five Nights at Freddy's. And then eventually they concluded with like a little high five. He's like, okay, high five. Give me some skin. So anyway, they find some open Voodoo Rangers in his car, which is the same case he had in the very beginning of the video. I think we've got some real strong evidence to prove that he was probably drunk driving here, I would say. I think that one's kind of locked in. He's been charged with quite a few things. I don't think he's been sentenced or anything yet. But yeah, Jeffrey, not good, man. A big frown from me on this one, brother. Drunk driving, little PSA. Don't do it. Not good. That's about it. See ya.
Units.
Of this Idaho chaos, you have Ashley Gillard, a self-described TikTok psychic who essentially insisted that her tarot cards had revealed the truth about what was all behind this. And honestly, I've covered a lot of extremely stupid actions here on this channel, but her decision making might be some of the worst I've ever seen in my life, because there is zero upside to what she did other than a little bit of attention on TikTok. I honestly still do not understand her, nor why she decided to do this for years. Because according to her, the culprit wasn't some unknown figure hiding in the shadows, it was someone who these students may have actually known. She pointed the finger at Professor Rebecca Schofield, a respected faculty member at the University of Idaho. In fact, she still has a full breakdown video accusing the professor pinned on her YouTube homepage.
Everything that I'm saying and most of everything that happened to the students that night and before is evidenced in the app that Rebecca Schofield used to communicate with all of her collaborators. So if there is anybody who doesn't care about spiritual wisdom or does not understand spiritual wisdom, and you have the authority to do more, to get evidence, you can, if you have the legal authority to, subpoena Rebecca Schofield's electronics, we subpoena these collaborative book apps, whatever you need to do to discover everything you need to know.
And who knows, why this video is still up. But obviously, Ashley, this self-proclaimed TikTok psychic, used her platform to call for people to fully investigate the professor. And after all of this, it's still up and online. And these claims were just so laughably stupid, it's painful. So Ashley claimed that Schofield had been having a secret romantic affair with one of the victims. And in a wild leap of logic that only a TikTok psychic could ever make, supposedly, she did it to keep that affair hidden. I mean, just taking a second to realize how insane that actually is. We're talking about a grieving campus, terrified students, families demanding justice, and there's just some TikToker deciding to write her own personal fan fiction about this tragedy. Like, this is not a person who's offering any comfort or clarity. She was just making up her own fictional stories, publicly accusing a professor of ending someone's life based on nothing but spiritual intuition. Hello? It's a shame that her spiritual intuition didn't tell her how terrible this would make her look. This was not an investigation. This was just pure clout chasing while LARPing as an investigator. Also, this incredibly stupid storyline of hers is literally the plot of the first season of How to Get Away with Murder. So spoilers if you haven't seen it, but it did come out in 2014, so I don't feel too bad for spoiling it. But in the show, the perp is essentially the professor trying to cover up an affair. The professor pays someone to then go do the murders for them. So I'm not saying that Ashley watched that season and made a few TikToks, but I also wouldn't be surprised if she did. She also seems wild enough to watch a show and go, wait a minute, I'm getting a spiritual intuition here. Let me open TikTok. Honestly, how else would all of this go down? And this story just gets so much worse. But first, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Incogni, because at this point, it's almost like there's a new massive data leak every single month, with even Coinbase recently being hacked earlier this year. When that happens, your personal information ends up on the market for scammers to purchase, and once that happens, they can use it for all kinds of damage, from crafting convincing phishing emails and texts to opening credit card accounts and even filing fake tax returns in your name. Unfortunately, data brokers are the problem here. They scrape your info from everywhere, package it, and sell it to the highest bidder. That's unfortunately why you're being targeted by scammers and all sorts of telemarketers. It can also mean that your home address, relatives, and employment history are exposed to complete strangers. But that's where Incogni comes in, as Incogni scans the internet for your personal information and automatically sends takedown requests, and they will actually keep checking for you to make sure that you don't get put back into the system. I know I've been using Incogni for a little bit over a year and a half, and it's already had 770 data collectors take my information down, which has saved me roughly 577 hours of manual work if I had to call every single data broker myself and have them remove my information or send emails. And even better, Incogni just introduced unlimited and family unlimited plans, which include their own custom removal features. So if you see your info sitting on a sketchy people's search website or database, you can actually just point it out and Incogni's privacy agents will handle that takedown for you. The family plan lets you extend the goodness for up to 5 family members. So for me, one of the biggest wins has been the peace of mind. And as a bonus, those constant spam calls I used to get multiple times a day, they're now gone. And more importantly, I know my address, shopping habits, and even employment history aren't just floating around in the open for anyone to abuse. So if you want to start taking your privacy more seriously, you can go to incogni.com/Atozy and use code Atozy for 60% off. I've seen it firsthand. Data brokers don't give up easily, but Incogni does the annoying work for you, and honestly, it's been a massive win for me. So I'm grateful Incogni wanted to support the channel and allow me to promote a product that I personally use and enjoy. So again, if you think Incogni could help, you can go to incogni.com/Atozy or click the link right down below to start taking your personal data off the market. But without further ado, let's continue the video. So Ashley didn't just make one outrageous claim and move on. She flooded TikTok with video after video, each one digging her hole just a little bit deeper, and in these posts, she flat out declared that Rebecca Schofield, she ended the lives of Kaylee and all the other victims, as if repeating it enough times would just manifest this to be true. So she insisted that Schofield had access to a white Hyundai Elantra, but here's the catch. That claim only came after the police publicly announced that they were in fact looking for a white Hyundai Elantra connected to the crime. So, in other words, her so-called psychic visions and intuitions look more like scrolling through her news feed looking for details that she can then plug into her fanfic here. She even went so far to actually invent an entire conspiracy claiming that Schofield had hired Jack, a friend of one of the victims, to act as a hitman. And I guess to make her fictitious story sound even more juicy, she also painted Schofield as a sugar mama, supposedly bankrolling travel expenses and throwing money around to just keep the affair alive. The only problem here is there was actually no evidence to back up any of this. Her only source were, in her own words, her tarot cards.
Nice argument, Ashley. Why don't you back it up with a source? I got it all from my tarot cards, Jack.
I am not joking. That's it. No witnesses, no documents, no rumors, just printed pieces of cardboard. And this is one of those trials that I really wish that I was there, because seeing her throw down tarot cards in court would go platinum when it comes to all-time experiences. But what's worse is that she just continued with this fantasy even after like every piece of evidence was telling her that she was wrong. The Moscow Police Department literally released a statement saying, "We have no evidence that this professor is involved." So for most people, that would be the end of it. But I guess for Ashley, she just saw that as fuel to double down. And she does that a lot. So even after Brian Koberger was arrested and charged, the actual person who committed the crime, she still clung to her version of events like it was gospel. And eventually, Professor Schofield had no choice but to fight back. She filed a defamation lawsuit because honestly, imagine being a professor just trying to live your life and suddenly you're being plastered all over TikTok as a supposed murderer. This professor is literally living through a nightmare. I can't believe that this is actually happening to her. And technically, it's not over yet because she still hasn't taken down these videos. I can't believe this. And this professor did not want to sue her. She gave her like 80 billion chances to just retract her statements, delete all the videos, and go do whatever TikTok psychics do without defaming people. But instead, Ashley literally decided to make a video saying that she was going to wipe her behind with the cease and desist letter. So yeah, essentially the professor had no choice but to actually sue her. And the lawsuit stated that Professor Schofield had never met Gilliard. She also does not know her. She does not know why Gilliard picked her and repeatedly falsely accused her of the crime and to be romantically involved with one of the victims. Professor Schofield also does know that she has been harmed by the false TikTok and false statements. And it also says that the professor fears Gilliard's false statements may motivate someone to cause harm to her or her family members. And that is honestly a very valid fear considering how high profile this case is and how many lunatics there are online. So Gilliard's response, she decided to represent herself in court. She had no lawyer or legal training, just her and her psychic intuition back at it again because that hasn't gotten her in enough trouble yet. And obviously, that was a spectacularly bad idea because she missed deadlines, she ignored discovery requests, and when it came to the time to explain her claims, she admitted under oath that her only basis for all of her accusations were her so-called spiritual research, tarot cards, and intuition. I also wouldn't be surprised if she tried to throw down an Uno reverse card during the court proceedings as well. She brought her ideas to court, but they weren't legal arguments or even evidence, so they were just complete nonsense, and the court treated it as such. The judge was very blunt in their ruling. Defendant's psychic intuition, without more, cannot establish a genuine dispute of material fact. Translation: tarot cards don't count as evidence in federal court. Sorry, bud. Now go pay her $80 billion because that's probably what you owe her at this point. Obviously, that last part was not the case, but I don't even know how Rebecca will even collect anything. Who knows? Maybe her wages will get garnished so she can start paying back the professor, but unfortunately, she's unemployed. Shocker. Who would have thought? Because let's be real, if you spend years of your life slandering a random professor who did nothing wrong, clearly you're not employed. But as a result, the court ruled that Gilliard had indeed defamed Professor Schofield, and it didn't stop there. The professor was also granted the right to pursue punitive damages because the judge said Gilliard's conduct was not just careless, but outright dangerous. So fast forward to July of 2025, and the case finally reached its conclusion. Brian Koberger, the man long suspected of the crimes, stood in court and pleaded guilty to all charges. His sentence was pretty much as severe as it gets, 4 consecutive life terms, plus an additional 10 years, making sure that he will never leave prison. So when asked directly by the judge, Koberger admitted, "Yes, I'm pleading guilty because I am guilty." That one line erased years of speculation. The prosecution then laid out the timeline of what actually happened. Koberger's car was seen parked near the house, his DNA was found on a knife, and his phone records placed him in the area at the night of the crime. And at that point, there was nothing left to argue. No mystery, no psychic loophole. The real person behind it all had actually confessed, and the evidence lined up with it. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars. And that means that Ashley Gilliard's so-called psychic investigation isn't just legally debunked or publicly debunked, it's been obliterated by reality itself. At this point, Professor Schofield's name is fully cleared, not just in the courtroom, not just in the media, but now factually, with Koberger himself admitting guilt. She was never involved, never connected, and never should have been dragged into this in the first place. But ladies and gentlemen, TikTok psychic Ashley, on the other hand here, has been found liable for defamation, could be on the hook for massive damages, and I guess whatever reputation she thought she had is completely in the ruins. The irony here is she lost a defamation case simply because she couldn't stop defaming the very person that was accusing her of defaming her. Honestly, it's kind of rare to see a grift backfire this hard. She acted like waving around tarot cards made her just completely bulletproof against the laws. And I'm a psychic with some sort of like legal shield. Spoiler alert, it's clearly not. The court didn't buy it, the jury won't buy it, and now the world knows that all this nonsense is clearly not true. I guess this is just another shining example of how TikTok clout chasing almost always ends in disaster. Honestly, at this point, I've lost times at how many times I've slapped TikTok into the title, but this one, once again, completely takes the cake. She exploited a real tragedy, dragged an innocent person through the mud, and then tried to pass off tarot cards as hard evidence. This isn't a one-off thing for Ashley, because Ashley isn't just using her abilities for this case. No, she's posted multiple videos online discussing other victims and other crimes.
This reading is on Ms. Susana Morales, Chiquita Susana Morales. She was found February 2023, but she went missing July 26, 2022. She was 16 years old. They did find someone guilty of this crime. His name is Miles Bryant. I believe like 2 or 3 weeks ago, he was found guilty. He was tried and found guilty. He was a police officer. At the time of the crime, he could have been about 20 or 21. He was in a National Guard, and he lived around this beautiful young lady. He was actually like the community officer, maybe like as a second or third job in her apartment community or community where they lived.
At this rate, we might see one of those like rinse and repeats. She might just get sued by yet another person, and then she just keeps going because clearly nothing's gonna stop her. She clearly does not care if someone's been found guilty or not. She doesn't care if the family has already been given closure. She's dragging these cases online one way or another, and now she's officially debunked. The professor cleared, Koberger is guilty, and Ashley Gilliard is nothing more than a cautionary tale of why you don't get your true crime news from a psychotic TikToker. I was supposed to say psychic there, but she's acting psychotic, hence the slip up. And the fact that she's just been in denial the whole time, even calling people like me idiots for just calling her out here on YouTube.
Well, I've had a couple idiots comment on my video and say that I've lost the case. I haven't lost the case. It's still ongoing, so don't listen to these really idiotic YouTubers.
I mean, this is just so ironic. And then she loses her case and posts this.
My reputation is destroyed. The TikTok page that I built for years is gone. She's winning in court. My business is ruined. Why do y'all keep commenting? What else could you possibly want?
Wild guess here. Maybe people just want you to apologize. And honestly, the wildest part, she could have just gone down the route of just making fictional crime stories, but nah, she couldn't do that. She prefers to just slander people, I guess. She's essentially just the final boss of jobless behavior because she even admitted that she quit her job to do her spiritual journey full time.
I even quit my job to continue on to my spiritual journey. Focus solely on it, you know, of course, being a mother, but my spiritual journey was top priority in my life for years, over 7 years. So I left my job 2016, I want to say. Yeah, end of 2016. So, and this is not just a regular job. I was like in federal HR. I built a career for myself, and I had a promising future.
Yeah, keyword there. Had. And then she threw it all away to slander random people on the internet, accusing them of some of the worst crimes committed with zero proof. What a great use of that master's degree. So, if you've ever wondered whether tarot cards hold up in court, the answer is clearly no. Then on top of that, if you ever wondered if TikTok clout was worth getting destroyed over in a federal courtroom, also no. But I mean, hey, at least she didn't super glue veneers into people's teeth like this woman did, who's now facing 15 years in prison over that, which is just a wild story I would recommend checking out here. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Because without the units, the base gameplay would be literally unplayable. And speaking of base gameplay, we are currently at 2 minutes, 15 seconds. And now we can see some of the cool minigames you can play with your monsters. Such as racing, practicing Valorant, demolishing buildings. After which you can also visit food stalls and give your pets snacks. And then, 3 minutes into a 4-minute trailer, we finally get to the gameplay. Yes, this might be a good indicator as to what kind of a game this might be. But that aside, just looking at the screenshot, there is a lot to pick apart here. The UI here is as TFT as it gets. On the left you can see the traits, there is also a little tab for the stats for damage done and taken. I assume the counter on the left is not econ. Instead, it might be a passive power-up, because more of these pop up later. Also, there are items here, but you will see them later. But most importantly, at the bottom, you can see that you can change your trainer. In fact, at the beginning of the round, you can see that your trainer buffs your monsters. And so, now it's obvious where the gacha mechanic is gonna be. It seems like you will be pulling for characters that give your board buffs. I am not surprised in the slightest. Now here we can only see a PvE round. I'm gonna assume these will be all over the place in the story mode. After which, the TFT inspirations really bubble to the surface. Because we get augments. That's right, we get 3 augments to choose from, all of which have their own separate rerolls. You get emblems that fill your traits, but seemingly there is a gameplay change. It seems like you don't buy the units from a pool. Instead, it seems like you generate money and then you buy the specific units you want? That part is interesting, because now it would make sense what the collecting of monsters would be about. Maybe you do have to get them in the outside world so that you would then use them in the gameplay. But that is where we also have to mention, yes, although this is a Hoyoverse game, this is the first time they went for PvP. And since it is a gacha game, the ranking is gonna be interesting. But that's all the information we got from this trailer. It was a 4-minute trailer where 1 minute was the gameplay we were looking for, the other 3 minutes were running around and doing the Hoyoverse stuff. Now on the official website we also get some extra bytes of information. Here we can learn that the pets are actually called Anima. I would say that's a pretty okay name, but then I get WoW PTSD. And yeah, the designs of these Anima are pretty good. I can tell that some of these are gonna become instant classics. The boba bird is very creative. And yes, there is a lot of different food designs. My favorite is the Mimu. And it's not even close. You can also see that the creatures are numbered, just like they are in something like Pokemon, which means that collecting will be encouraged. And currently there are 56 of these. And the names are probably as creative as they are in something like Pokemon. But then the website also shows us the characters. Here they are split into Sovereigns and Novarchs. Who are either of these? We have no idea. But the description kinda treats them like gods. For example, this is the Novarch of Hate. And yes, all the designs here are very Hoyoverse-y. Remember that these are subject to gacha, which means that they have to be as attractive as possible. And so in general, the designs work, and to prove that we are in the universe of Star Rail, Blade is one of the characters who can be found here. Though here, he will not use his immortal steel to slaughter his opponents. Instead, he'll send a puppy at them. And that is pretty much all the info we have about TFT's newest competitor. Now I'll be honest, it is actually cool to see someone tackle this entire genre. Because every developer knows that having competition is actually healthy. That is exactly what's gonna push you into making your game even better. Which is why it has been kinda mind-blowing to see TFT evolve so much with no one pushing them. If anything, this proves how creative the TFT team is. And so it is cool to see that finally someone stepped in, but it's curious to see that it is Hoyoverse. And that's not because they are the masters of gacha games or anything like that. No, it's because of how they write their universes. This is a cute game. All the monsters are very cute, but all the Honkai universes are full of death. And so of course the plot is about the world ender.
We had a video yesterday where people have been trying to get to the bottom of this fucking cheater. Everybody thinks this person's a cheater. Now, at this point, am I convinced that they're a...
That once again adds E to
My aim was too good, I guess.
Was denied. Now,
right
after Riley's cheat clips were posted on social media, Twitch banned him again. But this time, instead of serving another 7-day ban, he was back after just 24 hours.
Yep.
Of course, the Fruit Loops defending Riley claimed he appealed.
Oh, bro, I haven't heard that in a while. Damn, bro, that's some 1998 shit.
And his account was reinstated.
Man.
As if that somehow proves he wasn't cheating.
Yeah.
I can now prove not only that they lied and tried to gaslight the situation, but that they even went as far as compiling a list of notable names in a desperate appeal to authority.
Oh my God.
Instead of addressing the actual cheating evidence, they point to big streamers or trusted community figures who supposedly vouch for Riley. As if name-dropping well-known people somehow makes him innocent. But if this were a courtroom, that list wouldn't even make it past the judge. It would be tossed out immediately as nothing more than hearsay.
I think, you know what? This is a very good point. We need to send people to, like, we need to have court investigations on people cheating in these video games. It's gone too far. It's too far nowadays. There's too many fucking cheaters. This is outrageous.
Information, but riddled with errors and outright lies.
Yeah.
And I'll come back to that later, as I'm not letting that slide.
Of course.
But getting back to the bans, they claimed Riley was unbanned after just 24 hours and didn't need to serve the full 7 days.
Right.
That's false, and here's why. In 2024, Twitch could ban a first offender anywhere from 1 to 7 days at the discretion of the enforcement team.
Sure.
In Riley's case, he got the maximum. But in 2025, Twitch changed its rules in an attempt to be more transparent. Now, first offenses are automatically just 24 hours. So no, Riley served his full ban. They lied to you. All of them. They said he appealed.
Well, yeah, everybody knew that. So he appealed and he got a 24-hour, yeah.
And that Twitch reviewed his gameplay and lifted the ban. But that's nonsense. His appeal was denied. Both times. And in both cases, Riley had to serve
How do you know it was denied?
Higher length of his ban for cheating in multiplayer games.
I mean, I guess you could apply.
Initially,
we
had only circumstantial evidence and didn't know the reasons for either ban. In 2024, however, Riley posted that his aim is simply too good, which he appeared to offer as the explanation, effectively acknowledging a cheating-related ban.
Riley C isn't Riley CS.
Same applies to his recent ban. While the exact basis was unclear at first,
that could be
newly obtained evidence indicates he was banned for cheating, served the full length of the ban, and had his appeal denied after a manual review of his gameplay and submission.
Well, hello, Riley C. Your account was recently suspended. Determined that your account will remain suspended. So this is the correct answer. It said right. Yeah, this says right. No, it says it right here.
Not mass reports. Because the enforcement
the idea that Twitch bans off of mass reports isn't true. They don't ban off of mass reports. Because if they did, off of mass reports.
Because the enforcement
the idea that Twitch bans off of mass reports isn't true. They don't ban off of mass reports. Because if they did, you would have seen every e-girl get insta-banned. You would have me and Hassan getting banned every day. It's his alt? Oh!
Manually looked at the evidence and rejected his appeal, proving this was not automated. What began as circumstantial evidence is now substantive. There is direct support for the conclusion that Riley was banned for cheating in multiplayer games.
Cheaters often change names.
Yeah. Now I want to move on to what I'm calling the Riley list. A strange collection of names that the aiming community has put together in an attempt to clear his name.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, this is nothing more than an appeal to authority, which
Creator. It's the aiming community, not the spelling community.
carries absolutely no weight. I know this firsthand. In court, what matters is expert testimony, a doctor giving an opinion on a misdiagnosis, or in this case, perhaps an anti-cheat developer providing their technical analysis. Correct. But what do we actually get? A handful of streamers...
XQC? Yeah, XQC probably said the same thing that most people said. I don't know whether he's cheating or not. Maybe he is, but it doesn't prove it. Like, the video doesn't prove it. And even Call of Shame said that himself in the last video. He said that you could not be sure unless it was analyzed with AI, because the type of tool that they're using is meant to mimic high human level gameplay. So do you see kind of what I'm saying? So, like, you shouldn't blame anybody for saying that they thought it was real, because it's supposed to look real. It's a machine. That's what it's done to do.
With zero knowledge of cheating or hacking. They list Huskers, for example, the same person I exposed just last week for cheating in Battlefield. This is someone with a history of cheating allegations, corruption claims, and being caught exploiting in multiple games. That is not a...
What?
Credible source. On top of that, they can't even get their facts straight.
What?
He left Luminosity last year, and he has never won the World Series of Warzone. That claim is a flat-out lie.
So they're just making up bullshit.
He's never won a single professional tournament on LAN. Calling himself a World Series of Warzone champion is laughable. The titles he's talking about were North America-only online events, played from the comfort of his bedroom. XQC is once again another terrible source. Just because he's a big...
Oh, no. That's my boy. No, come on.
...streamer doesn't automatically make him credible. In fact, the very idea that a large following equals credibility...
Okay, so he's right, but XQC also is a former professional Overwatch player, and I understand he was playing Winston main, right? So it doesn't mean it's not really FPS. But at the same time, like, he's played Valorant. XQC, I think I think that he's a legit source.
Only reinforces my earlier point. Popularity is not proof.
True.
Especially when it comes to cheating in multiplayer games, his opinion carries no real weight. This is the same guy who publicly defended Nadia, going so far as to break down my video live on his channel and dismiss it as a witch hunt simply because she's a woman.
By the way, Nadia doxed one of her viewers whenever they sent her a negative message on Twitch, and then Twitch never really did anything about it. So they let her read out the real-life name of the person who donated to her on stream, and she completely got away with it. Isn't that crazy? Wow. Where's her ban? She didn't get a ban.
He insisted there was no evidence of her cheating, yet she was permanently banned later that same year.
Alright, I'm gonna be willing to say it, chat. I'm gonna be willing to say it. All the shit we're talking about, all this garbage, it's all actual dog shit. All the chat, I don't care saying again, chat. All the cheating stuff was unfounded. All this is garbage. It's all stupidity. I'm sorry. I wish I could. Guys, there's so many things to criticize her for. Not this.
Bro, I just got banned.
Oh man. Well, there you go, right? I mean, I think that really you should listen to the dev. They're probably gonna know the most of it. Isn't she a hot tub streamer now? I have not. Why would I give a fuck what she does now? Irrelevant. Who cares?
They even listed someone called CB, an esports caster.
CB?
But since when does a caster have any real relevance in proving Riley wasn't cheating?
True.
Or maybe, just maybe, there's another reason he jumped to Riley's defense. Is this supposed to be a list of credible sources, or just a collection of friends? Anyway, let's continue.
Yep.
Then there's Otter, the guy who pretended to work for EA until he was community noted as a liar. The same guy...
Wait, what? I think that he's probably memeing, right? I mean, he must have been memeing.
The same guy I personally caught cheating in Battlefield and who previously tricked not one, but 2 independent anti-cheat systems.
Why is everybody cheating? Why are they? What is that? What the hell is going on? Holy shit! For clout?
Not exactly the best source to prove Riley isn't cheating. Next is Metaphor, buried under multiple cheating accusations in Warzone, from suspicious aim to boosting. And remember, this one also said Nadia doesn't cheat. She's an incredible player, and everyone that says otherwise is brain dead.
Right.
Then there's Daniel Capadia, an esports caster who insisted Riley is clean, even citing Riley's own cheat developer, who just so happens to also be Riley's editor. Yeah, probably regretting that one. These are just commentators. How are they even considered credible sources on what cheating looks like?
Because when you're desperate, you're going to grab onto anything to prevent yourself from drowning. It's pretty simple, isn't it? I think it's obvious.
Then you've got names like Marksman, hyped up as a search and destroy demon. A demon? We all know why he defended Riley, so let's not pretend.
I don't know. I do think that there's definitely, like, you do have own group bias, you know, solidarity with stuff like that. I mean, I can't say that's the reason why, but, you know, it's hard to say.
We have Sarah Frags. Look, you can't just keep citing members of the trans community as if that alone makes them credible sources to Riley's innocence. This whole list is laughable. If you see anyone holding it up as proof Riley never cheated, you can safely dismiss it for what it is, propaganda. Not me, though. I worked on the MSN Gaming Zone, where I monitored cheating across a variety of titles. I even went as far as building my own gaming platform, yes, my own platform, directly competing with GameSpy and others at the time. Later, I collaborated with Microsoft to track down cheaters in Age of Empires, which, by the way, I still play to this day. I've even written my own anti-cheat, and no, I didn't need kernel-level access. I used AI-driven bots to infiltrate cheat sites, analyze loaders, extract cheat signatures, and break them down into raw data. And then, just to make things harder for cheat developers, I converted those signatures into what I called angelic script.
Who's this guy?
It was an innovative approach, and it worked. I developed Ricochet Trust Score, software that leverages user mode anti-cheat techniques to validate a player's PC integrity before the game even boots, using Secure Boot and TPM long before they became industry standards. I also built an AI-driven anti-cheat analysis platform called TrueSight, and even published a peer-reviewed PhD-level white paper on computer vision-based cheat detection. I know this field, I've lived it. When it comes to cheating, I am a credible authority. I've spent decades on the front lines of cybersecurity and anti-cheat technology. I worked on Symantec's double firewall, where my mission was...
Bro. All of that just to absolutely fucking obliterate some weird furry on the internet who's cheating in a beta.
Was clear. Identify
This is like whenever you're, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. It's like whenever you're playing the game and you accidentally aggro like a late game boss at the beginning and you're like, wait, what the, wait, how the fuck did I get here?
Threats and stop them. I pulled apart Trojans and worms like Sub7, NetBus, and Back Orifice.
Oh my god.
I was there during the IRC wars, when groups clashed for dominance. I watched the birth of botnets, the rise of reverse connections, and the inevitable collapses that followed. I lived it. They didn't. In my expert opinion, this person was